Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to the golden, sun-drenched dunes of West Africa. You're standing barefoot in the Sahel, the warm, dry sand shifting beneath your toes. The year is around 1280, and the air smells faintly of millet porridge, smoke, and dust kicked up by donkey carts lazily zigzagging across trade routes. You blink against the light. Everything seems quiet, slow, and shimmering with possibility. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the Niger River snakes its way through a growing kingdom. And somewhere not far from here, a baby who'll someday be rich enough to destabilize an entire city's economy is being born, just by showing up. That, my sleepy friend, is the beginning of the story of Mansa Musa, the man whose wealth makes tech billionaires look like coin collectors. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. In the comments, please tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge slowly through the early days of the Mali Empire, a growing power built on gold, salt, and the kinds of long-distance trade routes that make your calves ache just thinking about them. The kingdom is vast but not yet famous. It's still finding its shape and learning to flex without pulling a muscle. You walk past camels loaded with salt slabs, squint at traders from as far as North Africa, and listen to the gentle rattle of cowrie shells, West Africa's small but mighty currency of choice. And somewhere amid this slow-motion boom, a boy named Musa is born. Historians still argue whether Musa was born into royalty or rose through the ranks via political savvy and family ties. Either way, you sense early on that this kid's got something. It could be the way he organizes his toys by region. It could be how he calmly tells the village elders that their council meetings are inefficient. Or maybe it's just the confident way he pours tea, always from a height, always without spilling a drop. You watch him grow in the warm buzz of the Mande heartland. He's educated in Islamic law and philosophy. He learns Arabic, geometry, and maybe even some astrology, though he mainly uses the stars to figure out which direction the honey vendor lives in. Life here moves slowly, with long afternoons of storytelling, reciting poetry, and very intense debates over whether roasted yams are better with shea butter or honey. The empire, meanwhile, is stretching. It reaches into what we now call Guinea, Senegal, and parts of Mauritania. Trade routes twist like veins across the Sahara. And somewhere along one of these routes, a rumor starts to grow, of Mali's increasing wealth and of a future ruler who might one day become a legend. You meet Musa as a teenager, quiet, thoughtful, occasionally caught daydreaming at official functions. But he listens. Oh, does he listen? You sit next to him under the acacia trees, where the griots, West African storytellers, recount the histories of kings and ancestors. Musa absorbs every word. You almost nod off on his shoulder, but he nudges you awake. Pay attention, he whispers. Someday, they'll tell our story too. You glance around. Mali is still stabilizing. The capital, Niamey, hums gently in the background. And beyond the southern forests, traders from as far as Cairo, Fez, and Marrakesh are starting to take notice. Then something odd happens. Musa's uncle, Abu Bakr II, the reigning Mansa, the local word for king, decides one day that he's done ruling. No dramatic speech. No hostile takeover. It's just a polite announcement that he intends to build an expedition and sail into the Atlantic Ocean to see what's out there. Yes, he gives up his throne to pursue the 14th century equivalent of, I want to find Atlantis. Historians still argue whether he sailed west, sank, or reached some mysterious shore. But one thing's for sure, he never came back. And so, quite unexpectedly, the teenage Musa becomes the acting Mansa of Mali. It's a little like being asked to babysit a house the size of Europe, with several million tenants, 3 fluctuating economies, and precisely one nervous teenager in charge. You're there the day he's crowned. It's surprisingly low-key. A few musicians, a handful of camels dressed in ceremonial tassels, and an elder who can't quite remember the words to the coronation chant. Musa doesn't mind. He's too busy thinking about the future, how he'll build something rich and meaningful. The throne room is warm. The cushions are embroidered with gold thread. Musa leans back slightly, eyes closed, listening to the sound of distant drums echoing off the Niger's lazy banks. Stretched beside him, you let your fingers trace little spirals in the dust. "You ready for this?" you murmur. He opens one eye and smiles. "No," he says, "but I've got time." And time is precisely what he'll need. You wake to the smell of spiced tea and papaya drifting in the breeze. The throne room is still quiet, the cushions slightly squashed from last night's council meeting, where someone got very passionate about tax grain distribution. Musa sits cross-legged, studying a map drawn in reddish ink, more of a hopeful sketch, featuring kingdoms he's never seen and oceans nobody has returned from. He taps a spot labeled Cairo, with a curious look, and you know it's coming, ambition. But for now, his crown is too big, his court is skeptical, and the camels still don't recognize his authority. Becoming Mansa Musa isn't like flipping a switch. It's like herding goats with opinions. The nobles want stability. The traders wish to lower tariffs. The griots want more metaphors in their speeches. And Musa, barely out of his teens, wants a moment to breathe. But you notice something as he listens to his people, listens. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't scoff. He nods, strokes his chin thoughtfully, and quietly commissions a second pot of tea. Historians still debate how exactly Musa came to power. Some say he was Abu Bakr II's deputy or heir, and others suggest he was a compromise candidate chosen by powerful elites. But the result is the same. Musa is now the Mansa, and the empire is his to mold. Trail him through crowded markets and sleepy councils, watching him weigh every choice like a gold scale. He's not flashy, he's not loud, but he's paying attention. You visit Niani's palace complex, a sprawling mixture of stone, clay, and shade-giving baobab trees. It's modest compared to Cairo or Cordoba, but elegant, breezy, fragrant, and humming with activity. Courtiers practice diplomacy in whispers. Scribes ink trade records with brows furrowed in dramatic concentration. And you? You mostly snack on groundnut paste and admire Musa's growing collection of calligraphy samples. One afternoon, you accompany him on a tour of the kingdom's outskirts. It's the dry season, and the landscape rolls out in dusty golds and pale greens. Children shout greetings as the royal caravan passes. Local chiefs bow low, and occasionally, someone tries to gift Musa a goat. He politely declines but names one of his advisors, Chief Goat Negotiator. In Walata, you visit a salt market where traders' camels arrive crusted in minerals, their bells jingling sleepily. Salt, it turns out, is as valuable as gold here, sometimes more. Entire fortunes rest on these shimmering slabs. Musa walks among the merchants, not above them, pausing to greet each with the traditional handshake and a gentle joke about camel breath. That night, under a stretched goatskin tent, you and Musa lie on woven mats, staring at the stars. "What would you do," he asks, "if the world knew your name?" You chew on a date and consider. "I'd probably nap a lot more than you do." He chuckles. "I want to do something that lasts, something that matters." Then, after a pause, "I think I'll make a pilgrimage." You nearly choke on your date. "To Mecca?" He nods. "It's time." And just like that, the seed of one of the most legendary journeys in human history is planted under the soft West African stars. Preparation begins slowly. A pilgrimage, or Hajj, is a spiritual duty for all Muslims who can manage it, and Musa's faith is sincere. But this isn't just a backpack and go kind of trip. That is a logistical opera. Mali is massive, the Sahara is unforgiving, and Musa refuses to arrive without making a mild impression. You start noticing the signs, hundreds arriving trained, brushed, and fed with fig paste. Tailors work around the clock to create matching livery. Scholars debate which texts to bring for the long road. Musa himself calmly draws up a list of every village and oasis that needs extra food stored along the route. He plans to bring gold, lots of gold. Enough to fund the trip, of course, but also enough to gift to cities along the way. You raise an eyebrow. Are we being generous or dramatic? He grins. Both, but mostly generous. Still, historians wonder, did he know how his spending would ripple outward? Did he anticipate destabilizing the economies of the cities he visited? Or was he just trying to show respect in the most West African way possible, through extremely generous hospitality? You don't ask. You're too busy counting the number of elephants added to the caravan. Current count, One particularly grumpy one named Jabari, who has a fondness for fermented mangoes and no patience for tambourine players. The court is buzzing. Rumors swirl. Some say the caravan will stretch farther than the eye can see. Others whisper that Musa will bring back magic books or even flying carpets. A few worry he'll never return, like his uncle. But Musa reassures them gently, reminding everyone that this journey isn't about disappearing. It's about connecting Mali to the broader Islamic world and maybe learning a thing or two along the way. You glance at the sky one morning as the departure date draws near. The horizon seems to pulse with possibility. Musa stands beside you, quiet, his robes billowing in the breeze. "Are you ready?" he asks. You stretch, adjust your dusty turban, and smile. "Not even a little, but let's go anyway." You rise before the sun. The air is cool and still, as if even the birds are holding their breath. Across the palace courtyards of Niani, final bundles are being tied, last-minute scrolls tucked into leather satchels, and ceremonial turbans adjusted to perfection. You yawn and sip from a cup of spiced milk while watching a line of camels yawn. Two. One even lets out a sound like a deflating bagpipe. It's departure day. The caravan forms like a slow-moving river. Estimates vary wildly. Some say 10,000 people, others claim 60,000. Historians still argue whether that number includes all the cooks, attendants, soldiers, scribes, poets, and curious cousins who decided to tag along. Either way, it's a parade of epic proportions. You spot shimmering fabrics, jingling jewelry, portable kitchens, prayer rugs, silk-lined tents, and enough provisions to feed a small kingdom. And then there's the gold. Not neatly stacked in vaults, no. Musa prefers flair. Gold dust is packed in leather pouches. Gold ingots glint in sunlit chests. Gold accessories hang casually from camel harnesses, and at least 3 attendants carry golden fans to keep the air moving around the royal canopy. You look around, slightly overwhelmed, and mutter, "So this is the chill spiritual pilgrimage we were planning?" Musa laughs softly beside you. "It's still spiritual, just with better snacks." You cross the Niger River by raft, the water lazily lapping against the sides. The early stretch of the journey is gentle. Rolling hills, warm village welcomes, and frequent rest stops that Musa insists include honey cakes and fruit for the camels. The empire's edges blur as you move eastward. Timbuktu, still a small town at this point, waves you off with modest cheers and a group of scholars shouting book recommendations after the royal entourage. As you travel deeper into the Sahara, the mood shifts. The heat rises like a curtain. Sand swirls into your shoes, your nostrils, your soul. Camels grunt with righteous indignation. Jabari the elephant, who has been riding in a specially constructed platform shaded with palm fronds, develops an attitude problem and refuses to march without music. One flute player is assigned full-time Jabari duty. The caravan navigates dunes like ships on a sleepy sea. You lose track of days. Stars will overhead. Dates are rationed, shade is coveted, and storytelling becomes the main currency of morale. You fall asleep each night to griots spinning tales about river spirits, brave queens, and an ancient drummer who once kept time so perfectly that his village never missed a planting season. One evening, Musa calls for a pause. You're near the oasis town of Tuat, and rumors buzz that traders from North Africa are camped nearby. Musa sends envoys bearing gifts, fine cloth, salt, a little gold dust, and invites local leaders to dine. It's not just courtesy, it's strategy. Every encounter on this journey is a thread in the tapestry Musa's weaving. Mali is not just rich but respectful, sophisticated, and worth knowing. The feast is long and quiet. Conversations hum under torchlight. You learn that trade routes from here link not only to Morocco but beyond, to Egypt, the Levant, and even India. The world feels suddenly much bigger, and somehow still full of people who all want to know what the food's like in Mali. Musa, you notice, asks more questions than he answered. He's hungry for knowledge about trade systems, irrigation methods, architecture, astronomy. He scribbles notes in the margins of a book tucked in his sash. You peek once. The handwriting is terrible. You don't mention it. As the caravan pushes onward, through rough terrain and days so hot even the camels sigh dramatically, the purpose of the journey becomes clearer. This isn't just a pilgrimage. It's a diplomatic marathon, a traveling billboard, and a West African soft power masterclass. And Musa, he's performing it all with the calm patience of someone slowly stirring a pot of rice. Eventually, the cities grow closer together. You reach the edge of Egypt's territory. The roads are more defined, the accents shift, and you smell new spices in the markets: sumac, coriander, dried lime. The city of Cairo looms near. But first, border drama. The Egyptian Sultan, Al-Nasir Muhammad, has heard of the Malian king and his modest, gold-laden caravan and is nervous. Word is that Musa refuses to bow, not out of arrogance but out of religious conviction. Muslims bow only to God, not to earthly rulers. Still, this becomes a diplomatic wrinkle. Historians still debate whether Musa was immediately welcomed into Cairo or held back until the etiquette was sorted out. Some sources say he entered in full glory. Others insist the standoff lasted days. Either way, you eventually find yourself standing beside him, blinking in Cairo's sun, watching the most incredible wealth West Africa has ever produced meet the ancient might of the Islamic world. And it's a lot. The streets are packed. Onlookers gape. Musa's gifts flow like water. Gold for the poor, gifts for the scholars, and offerings at mosque. At the Friday prayer in Cairo's Grand Mosque, Musa donates so much money that it causes a brief hiccup. Gold floods the market. Prices drop. Inflation takes a nap in everyone's wallet. It becomes, accidentally, the most expensive act of generosity ever recorded. You watch Musa as he walks the narrow streets of Cairo, noting architectural styles, asking about irrigation techniques, and occasionally getting distracted by a stall selling cinnamon-roasted almonds. "You think I overdid it?" he asks you one night after giving a beggar another bag of gold. You shrug. "Well, you're the most popular guy in North Africa now." He smiles. "That wasn't the plan." And yet, the name Mansa Musa begins to ripple outward through merchants, scholars, gossipers, and eager scribes. Mali, once a distant name across the desert, is now a glowing rumor of riches and refinement. And the journey's far from over. You wake to the sound of Cairo, a soft cacophony of minarets, donkey carts, sizzling food stalls, and someone yelling about cumin prices. Musa, as usual, is already awake and writing and/or sketching. Or is he trying to calculate how much gold he's accidentally destabilized the local currency with? Spoiler, a lot. Cairo is a marvel, sprawling, bustling, and ancient. The Nile curls nearby like a sleepy blue ribbon, and the scent of jasmine mixes with market spices in the morning haze. You follow Musa through stone alleys, his long robe trailing dust, as he visits mosque after mosque, speaking to imams, donating Qurans, and occasionally pausing to marvel at a finely carved doorframe. The man loves a good lintel. One afternoon, he meets with Al-Nasir Muhammad. The Sultan is elegant, sharp-eyed, and intrigued by this mysterious king from farther than Timbuktu. The meeting is formal but friendly, with compliments, cautious laughter, and an enormous amount of mutually respectful side-eye. The two rulers dance a delicate court ballet of prestige. Musa refusing to bow, Al-Nasir insisting it's fine, totally fine. He's not mad, just impressed, but also maybe a little angry. They exchange gifts. Musa offers fabrics woven in Mali, rare spices, and, you guessed it, more gold. Al-Nasir offers richly illustrated books, rare inks, and a trained falcon that hates you on sight. You spend the rest of the day avoiding eye contact with the bird. Historians still argue whether this diplomatic visit was a masterstroke or a misstep. Musa's generosity certainly impressed the court, but it also triggered a regional economic wobble that lasted years. The value of gold in Cairo plummeted. Local merchants cursed softly into their ledgers, and the legend of Musa's wealth ballooned into something mythic, richer than kings, richer than the pharaohs, richer than sleep on a rainy day. But Musa doesn't linger long. He's still on pilgrimage after all. So you pack up again, though the caravan is lighter this time, thanks to all the gold donations. Don't worry, he's still got plenty. No one's switching to silver yet. The road to Mecca cuts across more desert and then up into rocky hills dotted with palm groves. The air still turns drier but cooler, and the landscape changes from golden dunes to reddish crags and dusty plateaus. You pass trading posts filled with tall tales and incense smoke. In one, a merchant offers to sell you the feather of an angel. You politely decline and settle for dates. Along the way, you pass other pilgrims, hundreds of them, from across the Muslim world. Yemenis in thick robes, Turks in woolen caps, Berbers with proud eyes and long staffs. You exchange greetings, meals, and travel complaints. Everyone's feet hurt, everyone's hungry, and everyone has a story. One evening, by a flickering fire, an old scholar tells Musa about the libraries of Baghdad. Another speaks of Damascus' flowing gardens. A third recounts tales of Sindh's astronomy schools. Musa listens like a child at bedtime, wide-eyed, absorbing it all. You realize then that this isn't just about religion for him. It's about connection, learning, and mapping the world, not just in miles but in minds. And finally, after weeks of travel, prayer, sore feet, and far too many arguments about camel etiquette, you arrive in Mecca. It's breathtaking. A sea of humanity flows around the Kaaba, voices lifted in unison, 1,000 accents murmuring the same prayers. You walk beside Musa, shoulder to shoulder with thousands, and for the first time in weeks, no one bows to him, no one asks for gold, and no one cares that he's a king. He's just one believer among many, equal, small, humbled. The rituals of Hajj unfold like a gentle rhythm. Tawaf circling the Kaaba, Sa'i walking between Safa and Marwa. They are standing at Arafat, where the desert holds its breath. You don't speak much during those days. Musa speaks even less, but his face is serene, glowing not with power or pride but something quieter. Fulfillment. One night, you find him alone, sitting on a stone wall, staring at the stars. "Do you feel different?" you ask. He smiles. "I feel grounded, like a tree that found its roots again." Then, after a pause, "Now we go home." But the journey home, of course, will be nothing like the one coming here. You begin the return leg with fewer supplies but more people. Scholars, poets, and builders, some from Cairo and others from Mecca, have agreed to follow Musa back to Mali. They're curious, they're ambitious, and, let's be honest, they've heard the food in Niani is excellent. There's also new energy for the caravan. Less spectacle, more purpose. You stop at new cities, learning from each, how they organize water systems, build domes, and keep scrolls dry in the rainy season. Musa takes notes. He's filled 2 whole scrolls already. His handwriting hasn't improved. Back in Cairo, Musa pays back every bit of gold he accidentally gifted on the way in. Sort of. He buys as much back as possible, though the market remains shaky. Economists centuries later will still be trying to model the impact. You focus on not tripping over bags of coins in the tent. You depart Egypt with the desert winds behind you and the weight of memory in your bones. As you head west, the landscape grows familiar again. Camels perk up. The stars shift back into their Malian patterns. Villages greet you like family. Drums echo through the valleys. And then, one day, almost too soon, the towers of Niani appear on the horizon. The city erupts in celebration. You're home. The dust hasn't settled since your return, and Niani is already transforming. News of Musa's pilgrimage has beaten you home by weeks. Every child, elder, and fish seller in the city has heard tales of the gold parade, the Cairo spectacle, and the mysterious trained falcon that, rumor has it, could recite poetry. You do not correct this rumor. You're barely off your camel when a crowd descends, chanting, cheering, throwing flower petals, and possibly bits of fried plantain. Griots begin composing new songs before Musa even dismounts. A popular chorus loosely translates to, "He gave away so much gold, even the river got jealous." Back in the palace, the cushions feel softer, the mangoes taste sweeter, and the royal bathwater has been steeped in hibiscus petals. An overly enthusiastic welcome home gesture from the attendants. Jabari the elephant gets his welcome feast and promptly steals 3 baskets of sugarcane. He's missed the spotlight, but there's no long rest in store. Musa, ever the planner, has come back not just with memories but with blueprints, literal ones, folded sheets, sketched diagrams, and frantic notes from scholars and architects he charmed along the way. He sets them out on the palace floor, a sea of scrolls and dreams. The man is ready to build. Historians still argue whether this post-pilgrimage construction spree was premeditated or inspired by the grandeur of Mecca and Cairo. What's clear is that Musa wastes no time. He commissions new mosques, fresh irrigation systems, and better roads. He's particularly taken with the architectural style of North Africa, whitewashed walls, horseshoe arches, and minaret towers that spiral into the sky like slow-motion corkscrews. You watch as construction begins on a new mosque in Gao, then one in Timbuktu, and then one in Jen. Each has imported materials, regional flair, and one or two design features Musa insists are essential, like crescent-shaped door handles that feel like the moon in your hand. You nod slowly and pretend you understand architecture. Scholars arrived, too. The caravan brought back more than architects. It brought minds, poets from Fez, jurists from Cairo, and a legendary calligrapher from Damascus who claims to have written the Quran in 7 different scripts, and lost 3 of them under his bed. Musa turns Timbuktu into a haven for them. He expanded Sankor, a mosque that became a university in everything but name. Lecture halls are built. Scribes copy texts into beautiful manuscripts. Students arrive from as far as Algiers and Kano. You help unpack crates of books, astronomy, law, poetry, medicine. One contains only a scroll titled 101 Cures for Stubborn Camels. It becomes your favorite. The city hums with ideas. At night, you walk through lantern-lit streets, the air heavy with incense and debate. A group of students argues about Aristotle on one corner. On another, a young scholar attempts to explain algebra to a goat. The goat is not impressed. One evening, Musa invites the scholars to dine with him. The table is long, the food is rich, and the conversation even richer. They discuss metaphysics over couscous, taxation over tea, and whether or not fish dream over honeyed dates. You lean toward Musa and whisper, "You built this." He smiles, brushing crumbs from his beard. "I just opened the door." Still, not all is smooth. Expansion stirs tension. Some regional governors, called Farba, grumble about the centralization of power. Local religious leaders worry that the imported scholars might dilute Mali's homegrown traditions. Even the marketplace feels it. Imported goods shift demand, and older guilds feel pushed aside. Musa addresses it with his usual mix of gentleness and grandeur. He invites dissenters to the council, listens carefully, and offers compromise. He institutes new trade fairs that spotlight local artisans. And when that fails, he invites people over for mango juice and diplomacy under a shady baobab tree. Somehow it works. But the real gem of this renaissance is the Great Mosque of Timbuktu. Built with mud brick and palm wood, it's not flashy but beautiful. The walls rise thick and cool. The minaret juts up like a desert lighthouse, and every prayer call echoes across the city like a breath through silk. Musa visits often, not to inspect, but to sit in the shade and watch children study their Qurans on woven mats. One afternoon, you find him barefoot, scribbling notes on a scrap of parchment. "What now?" you ask. He grins. "Libraries. I want more libraries." You laugh, then stop when you realize he's serious. Of course he is. The man who carried books through the Sahara and donated gold to every mosque he passed doesn't stop at schools. He dreams in scrolls. Soon, scribes are recruited. Translation houses pop up. Oral traditions are written down, myths, folk stories, and family genealogies. Musa insists every region's history matters and even commissions a traveling historian, Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, to record court traditions. There is some debate about how historically accurate al-Sahili was, but the man knew how to spin a yarn. You begin to realize that Musa isn't just building structures. He's building a legacy, quietly, gently, intentionally, brick by brick, verse by verse, one story at a time. And through it all, he remains strangely humble. No royal portraits, gold statues, or official poetry competitions proclaiming his name in neon ink. Just a quiet king with dusty sandals, 1,000 ideas, and a fondness for peanut stew. Timbuktu is bustling now. Traders brushing shoulders with scholars, camels jostling for shade, and the scent of ink, dust, and roasted yams everywhere. You meander through the streets, half dazed from the heat, half awed by the sounds of knowledge passing like fruit baskets. Musa's vision is working. Students sit in open courtyards, hunched over low wooden slates, carefully copying verses and formulas. Professors deliver lectures from carved wooden platforms while goats nibble disapprovingly nearby. You can hear the sounds of the future being written, sometimes with grammar mistakes, but still. But it's not just education that's expanding. Trade, the lifeblood of empires, is flowing stronger than ever. Musa opened more trade routes, revived old ones, and struck new agreements with Berber caravans and Saharan nomads. You overhear a merchant bragging that he just sold salt to a man from Constantinople and spices to someone who might have been lost, possibly both. One day, you follow a caravan headed to Walata. It's a smaller city but a key junction, where the dry winds of the Sahara meet the gold-dusted edges of the Sahel. The air smells of dried fish, leather, and sun-warmed parchment. You watch as goods are bartered. Kola nuts for silk, ivory for pepper, and one mysterious sack labeled miscellaneous magical herbs for 3 chickens and a confused cat. Musa is paying attention to all of this and not micromanaging but guiding, asking questions, and nudging here and there like a patient gardener. He sends messengers with letters rolled tighter than cinnamon sticks, each one containing a new policy, a praise-filled paragraph, or a gentle reprimand written in surprisingly poetic verse. The man is incapable of writing a boring memo. Still, despite the prosperity, Musa knows an empire isn't held together by trade and gold alone. It needs roads, reliable ones, so he invests in infrastructure, not just the glamorous stuff like bridges, but the unglamorous stuff too, like way stations, shade huts, and maintenance crews made up of surly teens who would rather be drumming. He sends surveyors to chart terrain, records distances between cities, and plants trees at regular intervals to help guide travelers. So you don't accidentally end up in a crocodile den, he cheerfully explains. You appreciate the gesture deeply. At one such stop, you meet a woman named Binta, an engineer from Gao designing a new type of drainage canal. She speaks in rapid bursts, gestures wildly, and has no time for courtiers but infinite patience for muddy blueprints. Musa listens intently, nods, and then funds her project on the spot. He's always had a soft spot for doers. Historians still debate whether this surge in trade and travel was a natural progression or Musa's orchestration. The evidence, as usual, is muddy. What's clear is that the empire feels more connected, more cohesive. Even the birds fly in more organized patterns. Though that might be a coincidence. You notice cultural shifts, too. Griots now sing of places they've never seen. Clothing styles evolve. Cairo's elegant embroidery blends with local cotton in odd but charming combinations. You spot a man wearing sandals embroidered with calligraphy and wonder what the words say. Probably taxes, you think. Musa, ever the sponge, encourages this exchange. He hosts cultural festivals where Berber music meets Mande rhythms, and scholars debate while chewing dried mango strips. He even commissions artists to paint scenes from epics, though the paint doesn't always stick to mud walls, so most of the art ends up in scroll form or carved into gourds. He also introduces new legal practices, blending Islamic principles with traditional customs. Courts have become more standardized, and disputes over cattle are resolved faster. One court even ruled in favor of a man claiming he invented the quiet drum, a musical instrument only he can hear. The ruling is appealed twice. Through it all, Musa remains grounded. He still visits the mosque every Friday, speaks softly to children, and insists on tasting every new stew in the palace kitchens. Quality control, he says, licking his fingers. You suspect he just likes stew. Then, without warning, a drought hits. The rains don't come. Crops wither. The Niger River shrinks back like a frightened snake. Grain stores grow thin. And for the first time in years, the songs in Timbuktu lose their bounce. Musa reacts quickly. He sends food caravans to the worst-hit regions. He opens royal granaries. He walks through the markets to ensure prices stay fair, though one spice merchant tries to sell him drought-proof salt at double the rate. That merchant mysteriously ends up managing goats in the outer province. He also calls for prayer, not as a performance but as a communal plea. The mosques fill. The air turns thick with whispered hope. Then, one night, clouds roll in, thunder cracks like a dropped drum, and rain kisses the roofs of Niani like a long-forgotten song. The people cheer. Children dance. You, overcome with gratitude, accidentally hug Jabari the elephant. He flattens your hat but accepts the affection. And just like that, the rhythm returns. Markets reopen. Classes resume. The griots find their groove again. One even debuts a new song, The King Who Whispered to the Clouds. It's wildly popular, especially among shepherds. You catch Musa alone one evening, sipping tea under a full moon. "You saved the empire," you murmur. He smiles, eyes reflecting starlight. "No, the people did. I just reminded them how." By now, you've stopped counting how many schools, roads, and granaries have appeared across the empire like mushrooms after rain. What started as a golden pilgrimage has become something bigger. Musa isn't just governing Mali anymore. He's curating, editing, and sanding the corners until the empire gleams like a polished gourd. But for all the impressive projects, perhaps the most quietly powerful one is a decision that doesn't come with fanfare or ceremony: the standardization of weights and measures. It sounds boring because it is, but it changes everything. You're in the royal hall the day Musa slaps his hand on a merchant's wildly suspicious scale and says, "This cup of grain should not weigh the same as my shoe." Laughter erupts. New protocols follow. Soon, traders across Mali used uniform rods, stones, and counting strings, most engraved with tiny notches and, for some reason, the occasional fish doodle. Historians still argue whether Musa borrowed these standards from Egyptian models or developed them locally with input from guild elders. But the results are undeniable: fewer disputes, smoother commerce, and a drop in traveling spice merchants claiming, "My pepper is weightless because it's magical." With economic fairness rising, so too does artistic expression. You wander past an open-air workshop where a woodcarver named Seydou shapes a ceremonial staff. The handle features two lions eating mangoes, symbolic, he says, of strength and snack time. Nearby, potters mold clay vessels with patterns that echo Fulani rhythms and Islamic geometry. The patterns spiral, bloom, and sometimes resemble accidental portraits of goats. Musa is delighted by it all. He commissions public art, hangs tapestries in marketplaces, and even encourages a debate club for teenage poets. They argue in rhyming couplets and occasionally throw bananas instead of insults. Progress. Even language evolves. Arabic is widely taught now, not to replace local dialects but to expand access to learning and texts. Musa insists that every child, rich or poor, should be able to recite a poem, write their name, and order sweet tea with grammatical precision. You overhear an 8-year-old correcting his father's pronunciation of astronomy. The father looks proud and mildly wounded, but with expansion come challenges. Some border regions grow restless, unsure whether they're being embraced or absorbed. Musa sends emissaries, not soldiers, with gifts of fabric, salt, and sometimes just honest letters. It works better than you'd think, mainly when the letters include jokes. Musa writes to a minor chief in the west, "I hope this fabric is fine enough for your wife's taste, or at least soft enough for your goats." The chief laughs so hard that he sends back twice the tribute and a hand-carved bowl shaped like Musa's nose. It becomes a palace conversation piece. And then, suddenly, the idea strikes him: mapping the empire. Not just trade roads and rivers, but the boundaries, the cities, and the places where people have built lives and legends. You watch as he recruits scholars, cartographers, and anyone with a halfway decent sense of direction. The first draft is, to be honest, a mess. Someone draws the Niger River as a straight line, and another places Timbuktu next to "Here be lions." But slowly the work refines. Towns are labeled, distances measured, and climate zones roughly sketched. The mapmakers even invent symbols: a fish for river towns, a scroll for universities, and a baobab tree for particularly shady resting spots. Musa adds a camel doodle near his birthplace. You quietly add a smiling sun in the margin when no one's looking. In the evenings, he invites the team to review progress. Tea steams from clay pots, scribes squint in torchlight, and someone inevitably spills ink on the coastline. The mood is light, but the mission is serious. Musa isn't just charting territory, he's archiving a legacy. And still, the empire grows. Ivory, gold, salt, textiles, and leather. Goods flow in and out of Mali like breath. Coastal merchants start learning Mande phrases to keep up. The empire is known in Alexandria, whispered about in Venice, and, according to a slightly overexcited sailor, in Lisbon, possibly ruled by a man who can talk to stars. News of Mali travels so far that, decades later, European cartographers include it in their maps. One famous example shows Musa sitting atop a golden throne, calmly holding a nugget the size of a coconut. Scholars still debate whether this depiction is accurate, flattering, or just jealous European marketing. You're watching history happen, but it feels more like stargazing, vast, slow, and oddly soothing. Even within the palace, change is constant. The kitchen experiments with fusion dishes, couscous spiced with tamarind and fried fish with honey-glazed millet. There's a short-lived attempt to make golden porridge using actual gold flakes, which ends when the griots complain about crunchy breakfasts. One morning, Musa calls for you. He's sitting under the remarkable baobab again, chewing thoughtfully on dried dates. "We've built much," he says quietly, "but what we remember, that's harder." You nod, sensing the shift. Legacy. Not in monuments, but in memory. In whispered songs, worn scrolls, and stories passed from grandmother to wide-eyed child. He starts writing his will that night. The palace quiets as Musa takes to his writing desk more often. A small oil lamp burning beside scrolls, reed pens, and a small carved bird that always seems to be watching you. He's not retiring. He still inspects public works and casually lectures visiting governors about grain storage. But you sense a new gravity in his rhythm. Less sprinting, more pacing. The will is no small task. Now stretched like tanned leather across much of West Africa, the empire brims with cities, peoples, and ambitions. Musa wants to be precise. He doesn't just divvy up land and power. He tries to write continuity like a griot with parchment instead of a drum. He names his son Magan a successor, a young man who, at this point, has already learned to recite Arabic poetry, ride a camel with one hand, and, most importantly, keep court without making eye contact with the angry parrot that lives in the map room. Historians still argue whether this choice was based on bloodline, competence, or sheer availability. Some suggest Musa's brother might have been a more capable administrator. Others believe Musa wanted to ensure a peaceful transition by choosing someone who had already integrated into courtly life. Whatever the truth, he decides with quiet resolve. You accompany him on what might be one of his last inspection journeys. The caravan snakes north toward Gao, stopping at villages that were once barely dots on a map and are now thriving outposts with irrigation, marketplaces, and, somehow, rival football leagues. Musa listens to local leaders, praises the weavers, and accepts offerings with warmth and only minor confusion. One village presents him with a ceremonial chicken that refuses to sit still. Back in Timbuktu, you stroll past Sankor. The university has grown sprawling, layered like lasagna. Lecture halls, student lodgings, libraries with scrolls that smell like dusty cinnamon. Musa visits the library one morning, lifts a scroll of astronomy, and reads aloud about constellations that once guided camel trains across the Sahara. "Maps in the sky," he murmurs, "and yet we still get lost on land." The scholars are compiling a catalog of the empire's knowledge, an ambitious effort Musa calls the heart of the Sahel. It contains everything from herbal remedies for stomach aches, like ground baobab bark, to treaties written in careful, looping script. One entry in the margin notes reads, "Don't trust the yellow figs during monsoon." You jot it down just in case. Culture continues to flourish. You attend a moon festival where griots chant the history of Sundiata Keita, Musa's great-uncle and the empire's founder. The performance lasts 4 hours, involving 3 costume changes, and one committed child pretending to be a heroic horse. The audience is rapt. Sitting among them with a shawl draped over his shoulders, Musa smiles. But for every celebration, there's a growing awareness that time moves in only one direction. The empire is firm but not invincible. Tensions on the fringes bubble. Some traders grow greedy, some governors ambitious. You overhear whispers about a northern chief who's been collecting taxes independently. Musa sends a diplomat. The situation calms for now. He's aware of these cracks but focuses on the legacy. He sponsors the transcription of oral epics, trains new judges, and standardizes architecture across major cities. The mosques in Walata and Jen begin to echo the aesthetic of Sankor: wide walls, wooden scaffolds for annual remudding, and towers that lean toward the heavens like sleepy minarets. You return to Niani, the capital, in time for Musa's birthday. No one knows his exact age, but the celebration involves grilled dates, acrobats, and a performance by a troupe of dancers dressed as various grains. The millet, to everyone's surprise, wins best costume. One night, you sit beside him in the garden. Fireflies blink lazily. A servant offers mint tea, which Musa accepts with a quiet thank you. He watches the stars as though trying to count them. "You know," he says, Wealth is a breeze, comes and goes, but justice, that's the soil. Everything grows from that. You nod. He said something like this before, but it feels heavier, wiser this time. The silence stretches long and soft afterwards like linen drying in the warm wind. That week, a group of ambassadors arrives from North Africa. They present fine textiles, a trained hawk, and a book of poetry. Musa responds not with gold, but with an invitation to walk the gardens, share meals, and attend a poetry night in the outer courtyard, where older men recite verses about love and leaky roofs. Diplomacy tastes better with ginger stew. Rumors begin to circulate. Some say Musa plans another pilgrimage. Others believe he's grooming his advisors for a post-him era. A scribe confides in you. He's thinking about the long tomorrow. You believe it. And then, without fanfare, Musa withdraws from public view for a few weeks. No official statement. There are just fewer sightings and more speculation. When he reemerges, he walks slower, carries a cane carved from baobab wood, and speaks with the careful rhythm of someone who knows each sentence might be remembered. He addresses the court one evening. This empire is not mine. It belongs to its people, its stories, its faith. Then he thanks his advisors, army, cooks, and, unexpectedly, the library cats of Timbuktu. The speech isn't long, but no one forgets it. After that speech, something shifts, not just in the palace halls or the shuffle of silk shoes on mosaic floors, but in the air, like the dry season arriving a week early or the distant thunder of camels moving toward a new trade post. Mansa Musa has begun his farewell, though no one says it outright. You notice the changes immediately. Meetings grow shorter. Letters are dictated instead of personally written. The afternoons stretch longer in the palace garden, where Musa now spends most of his time sipping tamarind tea, watching the bees flit between mariula blossoms, and, oddly often, trying to whistle tunes he heard once from a visiting minstrel. You're beside him more now, not as an advisor, scribe, or friend, but as a listener. Musa has more stories than time. He tells you about his first camel ride and how he fell off twice before a foreign dignitary. About that time, he got lost in his capital during a dust storm and had to bribe a fisherman with a gold ring for directions. About how he once tried to outlaw mango pits after slipping on one in the marketplace. That law lasted a week. Historians still argue whether these anecdotes are strictly true or just well-polished griot fables shared by Musa himself. Either way, they feel real enough when he tells them, his voice dry and warm like a distant drum. One day, you walk into the archive room and find him bent over a pile of scrolls. I'm copying down the stars, he says, so the next traveler can find their way back. He doesn't explain what he means. He doesn't need to. Word begins to spread. Musa is preparing to step aside. Formally, permanently, he wrote a public letter addressed to the people of Mali. Not just nobles or scholars, but every merchant, farmer, weaver, and wanderer. It's read aloud in marketplaces, transcribed by griots, and even carved into stone by a stonemason who insists on adding a small fish at the bottom. The message is simple. The sun sets not in sadness but in rhythm. You carry this light now. Soon after, he calls for his son, Magan. They walk together for hours through the palace garden, past the colonnades, and through the open-air courtyard, where musicians tune stringed instruments and vendors sell honeyed rice. There are no guards, no ceremony, just father and son, breathing in the world they helped shape. You follow from a distance, catching fragments of the conversation. When you judge, Musa says, listen to the silence between complaints. When you travel, he adds, bring more books than weapons. And finally, when you pray, mean it. The coronation is subtle, more a tone transfer than a clash of cymbals. Megan steps up, begins to speak at the council, and receives delegations. Musa watches quietly from the edge, occasionally chiming in with a pun, correction, or unsolicited advice about proper robe folding. You notice he laughs more now. One evening, he climbs a low hill outside Niani with a walking stick and a basket of dates. You sit beside him as dusk settles like a shawl over the savannah. Below, the lights of the capital flicker, fireflies echoing stars. I always thought it would feel bigger, he murmurs, handing over an empire. You wait, but it doesn't. It feels soft. You nod. The moment feels like linen pressed against the skin, barely there, but unforgettable. Over the next few weeks, Musa retreats further. He still meets with poets, requests spicy stew at least twice a week, and strongly believes in mosque ventilation. But mostly he watches. He watches people grow into their roles. He watches the scholars continue the debates he started years ago, whether the moon affects river tides and whether justice is a number or a story. He watches teenagers build a new irrigation system based on designs he sketched on a napkin during lunch. And finally, he watches the stars, as he did when he was just a boy in a lesser-known royal household, dreaming of maps and meaning. The day he dies, the sky is clear. There is no thunder, no trumpet, just a breeze. Historians still argue about the exact year. Some place it around 1337, others a bit earlier or later. The records are fuzzy, blurred by distance and the griot's flair for metaphor. But no one disputes his impact. The empire doesn't fall. It carries on, shaped by the grooves he carved, the patterns he set in motion. His name lives on, not just in dusty texts or grand monuments, but in lullabies, legal codes, and the very shape of markets under mango trees. In Timbuktu, the university remains a beacon. In Niani, children still chase chickens through courtyards he once paced. And somewhere on a yellowed map in Europe, a tiny image of a black king with a golden nugget marks the memory of the wealthiest man who ever lived, perhaps the most generous. You breathe in, eyes closed, and if you listen carefully, you can almost hear him laughing about that mango pit again. The years after Musa's passing unfold like a dream. You can't quite wake from soft edges, familiar places, new voices learning to echo the old rhythms. The empire keeps spinning, but the air feels different, like the pause after a drumbeat. Meghan officially takes the throne, but his robes are too long, and his advisors are too cautious. He tries, earnestly, sometimes brilliantly, but you can see it. The shoes are heavy, the shadow long. His father had not just ruled. He had woven Mali with gold, ink, and charisma. You still live at court, though your role has blurred. You're less a servant of the state now and more an informal archivist of memories. The griots have asked you for details. How did he pronounce Cairo? Did he ever wear indigo? Is it true he was afraid of frogs? You answer as best you can. Sometimes you embellish just a little. Not to lie, to honor the spirit of a man whose own life often felt like a legend wrapped in linen. One day, you walk the path to Sankor, where a young student recites a verse from a scroll Musa once held. Her voice falters on a line about the stars, and without thinking, you murmur the word she needs, lanterns. She smiles, corrects herself, and continues. Historians still argue how much of Mali's golden age persisted after Musa. Some suggest that wealth dwindled quickly under less capable rulers. Others say that the cultural and intellectual structures he built held firm for generations. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. Trade continues at first. Caravans still roll through the Saharan routes, their wheels etched into the dunes like stitches on parchment. Gold flows, salt moves, and scholars travel. But the world is shifting. New routes are opening by sea now, not sand. Portuguese ships skirt the coast, their wooden hulls slicing through centuries of camel traffic. The Mediterranean powers start paying more attention to distant shores than desert kingdoms. Mali's dominance begins to flicker. Still, Musa's influence lingers like incense. In Cairo, merchants still remember the man who broke their gold market. In Mecca, elders tell stories of the West African king who arrived with more wealth than restraint. In Europe, maps continue to depict a crowned black man holding an orb of gold, an image more symbolic than precise but powerful nonetheless. You travel to Wallata again years later. The mosque Musa funded has changed. The outer walls have faded, and the scaffolding is newer, but the shape remains. Children play in the courtyard where once scholars debated jurisprudence and astronomy. You sit under an acacia tree and sip weak tea. Someone asks you what he was really like. You answer, louder than you'd expect, calmer than you'd believe, and always smelled faintly of sandalwood and ink. In Jen, the great mosque still hosts the yearly festival of replastering. Families come together, smear mud by hand, laugh, and argue over whose cousin forgot the bucket this time. The structure rises year after year, just as Musa had intended, not permanence but pattern. You dream of him sometimes, not as a king but as a man muttering while reorganizing scrolls or biting into an overripe fig and regretting it instantly. In one dream, he's building a sandcastle in the Sahara. You ask why. He shrugs and says, "Practice." Across the empire, griots polish his story like a river stone. He descended directly from Bilal, the Prophet Muhammad's companion in one version. In another, he rode a lion across the savannah to tame rebellious nobles. One tale insists he invented peanut stew. You don't correct them. What matters isn't precision, it's memory. And Musa, more than most, understood that history is a mosaic of facts and feelings. That truth, told softly, survives longer than gold. Timbuktu remains the soul of the story. Long after his death, the city continues to swell with ideas. It's no longer the capital but has become something more valuable, a lighthouse for minds. Scholars from across Africa, the Middle East, and even Southern Europe come to study law, logic, and the surprisingly complicated ethics of date wine. Some scholars now refer to Musa's reign as the Golden Ripple, when West Africa didn't just shine but shimmered outward, quietly influencing thought, trade, and imagination across continents. You walk the halls of Sankor one last time. A new generation studies by candlelight. One is learning astronomy. Another is translating Aristotle. A third, half asleep, is doodling camels in the margins of a legal treatise. You smile. Even here, some things never change. You find a scroll Musa once touched. The ink has faded, but the handwriting is unmistakable, curved, deliberate, with the occasional overly dramatic flourish. The page reads, "Build not for glory, but for usefulness. Let beauty be the accident of care." You roll it up carefully and return it to the shelf. Outside, the wind rustles through the trees. A call to prayer sounds in the distance, carried softly through dusk. And in that moment, you remember something Musa once whispered while watching the stars. "I never wanted them to remember my name, just the feeling they had when they lived in it." You wake one morning to the sound of distant bells. Not the heavy, tolling kind from European cathedrals, but the soft clinking of camel bells, far off and familiar, like an old melody drifting in from another chapter of your life. It's a trade caravan that has arrived from the Sahara's heart. You hear the traders shouting greetings in Arabic, Sonic, and languages you can't place. Their goods smell of dust, myrrh, and whatever strange spice they've brought from the Horn of Africa. The market hums louder that day, and the courtiers bustle a bit more quickly. Mali may be mellowing with age, but the rhythms of commerce still beat on. You pause in the palace courtyard, watching as a young apprentice struggles to lift a bundle of scrolls that look suspiciously like they haven't been opened since Mansa Musa's time. You lend a hand, uncovering a batch of old plans, irrigation sketches, trade projections, and even a draft proposal for a flying library. Yes, flying, with birds and ropes. Musa was many things, but practical wasn't always one of them. Historians still argue whether that scroll proves Musa believed flight was possible, or if it was simply a metaphor for airborne ideas. You suspect it was both, and he wouldn't mind the confusion. A younger advisor approaches you later that afternoon. She's nervous. "Would you, maybe, tell the council how the old king handled this trade imbalance?" You blink. It takes a second to register that you are now the one who remembers. The stories have pooled in your bones, so you sit and tell them not as fables or lectures, but gentle memory nudges. You describe how Musa would greet traders personally when possible, asking if they needed shade or sugarcane water first. He always sniffed a bundle of goods before buying, out of curiosity, not suspicion. He believed trade was less about the gold exchanged and more about the ideas carried inside the crates. The advisor nods. She takes notes. She'll pass it on. Later, you find a group of schoolchildren playing at being kings and queens. One insists she is Mansa Musa and demands 10 imaginary elephants and a mango crown. Another insists he's the scribe and keeps adding very important trade agreements to a scroll that is a leaf. You smile again. The leaf scroll may be flimsy, but the legacy? Rock solid. The landscape of Mali has changed since Musa's day. The borders have blurred, the court politics have grown tangled, and the caravans aren't as constant. But the foundations, the bones of the empire, are still there. You can feel them in the way people quote his laws without realizing, walk the market path he widened for pilgrims, or keep griot stories alive through claps and call and response. You meet a visiting monk from North Africa who has come to copy texts from Sankor. He's pale with sunburn, thrilled by palm leaf manuscripts, and insists on calling every Malian student a genius. He asks you whether the famous Golden King truly walked barefoot into Mecca. You say, only when the shoes were bothering him. In reality, no one knows. Historians still argue whether Musa's humility in Mecca was heartfelt or performative. But you recall the man well enough to know, why not both? The monk smiles and scribbles a note. Another version of Musa was added to the growing constellation. You sometimes feel like a lighthouse keeper at the world's end, gently turning the lantern to ensure people still see where the coast begins. The empire doesn't need a hero anymore, it needs memory. And you, somehow, have become one of its keepers. Not long after, you're asked to help oversee a new construction project. A scholars' hall near the river was funded by a merchant who claimed to dream of Musa handing him a golden quill. It's built in the old style, with earthen bricks, soft curves, and windows shaped like crescent moons. The workers sing as they create, an old melody Musa used to hum when he thought no one was listening. Someone paints a mural inside the hall, not of Musa on a throne, but of a group of travelers crossing the desert, following a star. He is among them, indistinguishable at first glance. You like it that way. A foreign delegation arrives to study Mali's water conservation techniques. They marvel at the reservoir system and the canal blueprints. You casually mention, that channel over there? It was his idea. He sketched it after watching how goats walked around puddles. They don't know whether you're joking. You're not sure either. You begin writing more now, not scrolls but more minor things. Journal notes, poetic observations, a recipe Musa once tried to invent that involved sweet potatoes, ginger, and goat cheese. It failed, spectacularly. The courtyard reeked for days. Still, the notes pile up, stitched into your tunic, tucked behind door frames, woven into the lining of your satchel. You're no griot, but your memory has a melody. One evening, a boy approaches you, holding a fragment of an old tale. Is it true the king once turned sand into coins? You consider the question, then say softly, only the kind of sand that stays in the soul. He nods, satisfied, and runs off. The sun sets over the savannah in a splash of amber and rose. You sit beneath the same baobab tree Musa once favored, listening to the chirps of evening birds and the distant call of drums. And you feel something shift again for the first time in a while. Not an ending, just another ripple. Because the empire, like all great stories, doesn't conclude, it echoes. It adapts. It hums in the voice of a child asking impossible questions, in the dusty fingers of a scholar thumbing an old text, in the laugh of a trader who swears the mangoes were sweeter under Musa's rule. And in you, the wind tonight feels familiar, carrying the scent of clay, tamarind, and a distant charcoal fire. Someone is roasting peanuts somewhere, maybe for a wedding just because snacks are eternal. You lean against the warm adobe of a scholar's house and let the memories drift. It's quieter now. Not just the palace, but the empire itself. Not fallen, no, not yet, not entirely, but mellowed, like an old drum softened by time. The halls of power echo a little more. Some titles ring hollow, but others still carry weight, especially one, Mansa Musa. You hear it in places you wouldn't expect. A basket seller calls her most reliable customer as punctual as Musa. A young student grumbles that his teacher is as picky with handwriting as the old king himself. Even in jokes, the name has gravity. Historians still debate the actual size of Musa's influence. Some insist he was more myth than monarch, a shimmering mirage inflated by European cartographers who couldn't fathom African grandeur without exaggeration. Others argue he was underappreciated, a world leader whose impact should be taught alongside Charlemagne and Genghis Khan. But here, in the streets he walked, no one doubts. You stroll the riverbank, where fishermen now use nets he founded centuries ago. One waves at you and asks if you still have that story about the crocodile who tried to attend court. You do. You tell it, this time with extra flair. And the laughter rings just right. There's comfort in the continuity, even when things change. The city's skyline is different now. Minarets rebuilt, homes expanded, markets rearranged, but the bones are there. You pass a familiar doorway with carvings Musa commissioned after his return from Mecca. The wood's been sanded, restained, and repainted by at least 5 generations, but his favorite quote is still etched there. Knowledge is wealth you can carry through deserts. A camel caravan rolls past you, smaller than they used to be but still steady. You catch snatches of different tongues, Hausa, Arabic, and Portuguese. Trade flows more often by sea, but the desert still offers its slow, sacred rhythm. The driver raises a hand in greeting. You nod silently, thinking how Musa used to ask caravan leaders to bring him a story, a proverb, and a new way of thinking. He rarely cared much for the gold. You pause at a courtyard where children are learning to recite poetry. The teacher, an older woman with silver-streaked braids, sees you and smiles knowingly. She's teaching a poem attributed to Musa himself, though whether he wrote it or just liked it has been lost to time. It goes, "Let your words travel farther than your horses. Let your heart weigh more than your coins, and let your enemies wonder how you sleep so well." You chuckle. That last line feels painfully accurate. Musa could sleep through a thunderstorm, a border skirmish, and even the great grain debate of 1328. Not that you've forgotten the chaos he sometimes left behind. The overgenerosity, the tendency to announce projects faster than they could be built. He once tried to commission a singing fountain powered by goats. It was not a success, but that's part of it too. He wasn't just a golden statue or a perfect legend. He was genuine, bold, eccentric, stubborn, visionary. You saw him fuss over door hinges and debate Islamic philosophy equally. He once cried because a single student at Sankor recited a text with such beauty that he dropped his bowl of stew in awe. Now that's the story you always tell visitors. Forget the gold. Tell them about the stew. You pass an old stable now used as a grain storehouse. On the wall, a faded fresco shows Musa surrounded by books. A mouse has chewed off part of his crown, and someone's drawn a cat next to him in chalk. The effect is oddly charming. Somehow you think he'd approve. Beyond the market, the mausoleum built for him is at the city's edge. It's modest, shockingly so if you know the man. No golden dome, no grand staircase, just clay, stone, and the hush of wind. There are no official guards, but it is never unattended. A passerby always seems to pause, rest a hand on the wall, whisper a greeting. You do the same. Inside, it's quiet. The air is thick with the scent of incense and dry earth. A small, unmarked plaque sits to the side. Nothing flashy, just one line. He built not to be remembered, but to remember us. And maybe that's the real secret. He wasn't trying to stamp his face onto history. He was trying to gather the world in his arms. Books, people, ideas, and hold them high enough for everyone to see. As you leave the mausoleum, sudden gust of wind kicks up a swirl of dust. It dances momentarily, then settles, revealing a boy watching you curiously. "Were you his scribe?" he asks, wide-eyed. You hesitate, then nod. "I was one of many." He smiles and dashes off, calling to his friends, "I met the man who wrote down the mango story," and just like that, you've become part of it too. The story, the ripple, the legacy. Even now, the empire may fade. Maps may shift, borders dissolve, but as long as a child repeats his name, a student squints at a scroll, and a trader shares his proverb on a hot, dusty road, Mansa Musa is still walking beside them. You begin to notice it more often now. The small traces, the little fingerprints of Musa's legacy hidden in places most people overlook. There's a tiny alley behind the mosque where someone's painted stars on the walls. It's not stylized or symmetrical. Just a burst of yellow dots like someone scattered light across the mud brick at random. A child tells you it's because Mansa Musa loved astronomy. He once tried to name a comet, she claims, with great authority. You nod solemnly. That sounds exactly like something he'd do. Historians still argue whether Musa supported early West African astronomy or merely funded a few curious stargazers who liked to map constellations onto goat hides. But you remember him staring at the sky with his hands behind his back, mumbling about, "What's above shapes what's below." You stroll past the old artisan quarter. Most of the original workshops are gone now, replaced by tea houses, fabric stalls, and the occasional repair stand for bicycles. but here and there a carving remains. You run your hand along one, a lion with a scroll in its mouth. Musa once called that his emblem of learning with teeth. It never caught on, but you liked it. The potter's granddaughter recognizes you. She insists on gifting you a small clay jug etched with a phrase from Musa's early court sermons. It reads, "He who listens rules longer than he who talks." You chuckle. He did not follow that advice himself, but it's lovely in theory. As you pass through the city's heart, you notice a hush spreading over the crowd. Subtle, but you've seen it before. A traveler is approaching, a diplomat from the east, based on the embroidered dragon motif on his tunic. He bows slightly as he's introduced to you. "I've heard tales," he says, "that your king built a city from poetry." You think for a moment. "No," you reply. "He just let the poetry stay where it already lived." He beams, delighted by the answer. It offers a dried fruit you've never tasted, tart and sticky, like sour plum and honey. "From the mountains of my home," he says, "for your stories." The old exchange continues. Not gold, but culture. Not wealth, but wonder. Back at the scholar's house, you find a half-finished letter addressed to the rulers of a far-off island empire. It begins with a metaphor about the flow of water through hands. Musa's words scrawled in that big, sloping script you remember from when he dictated and you wrote furiously, trying to keep up. He always said ideas were like sand. They shifted, escaped, but shaped the dunes. And he was happiest when those dunes led people toward each other. A group of young scribes stop by later in the day, hoping you'll review their transcriptions. You agree, but make them sit on cushions and bribe you with mango slices first. They laugh. One asks what Musa's handwriting looked like. You describe it as eager. They try to copy the style. One nearly rips his parchment in the process. You tell them the story of Musa's attempt to forge a diplomatic treaty with a king by sending him a single sentence: "Let us compete only in kindness." It didn't work. The rival king was confused and responded with a shipment of onions. No one knows why. Still, the story lives. You walk with the scribes to a public reading in the square. A griot stands on a simple wooden platform, voice smooth and rich, spinning tales of Mali's glory days. She weaves Musa's journey to Mecca into a tapestry of sound and gesture, mimicking his pompous camel walk for laughs. The crowd roars. You do too. She catches your eye as you pass later. "You're the one who knew him, aren't you?" "Just one of many," you repeat. That night, you climb to the palace's roof, the stars clearer than in weeks. You lie on your back, arms behind your head, and think of all the places Musa's gold went. Some wasted, some wisely invested. Some were buried, and some were traded for a single idea. Historians still argue whether his pilgrimage helped or hurt Mali's economy in the long term, and whether the devaluation of gold in Cairo was a blunder or a power move. But lying here under the open sky, you're not thinking of coins. You're thinking of books, of children playing royalty, of mango slices traded for stories, of stargazers, poets, and women who still quote his metaphors in the market. And mostly, you think of the soft power of legacy, not the booming kind with monuments and maps, but the whispering kind that lives in habits and jokes and the shape of how people walk through the world. The moon glows overhead, brushing everything in silver. The breeze carries the smell of crushed mint and warm sand. And beneath that silent sky, you close your eyes and smile. Because even now, with the crowds thinning and the songs growing quieter, Mansa Musa's story, your story, is still walking, still humming, still golden. By morning, the city is stretching awake like an old cat, slow, creaky, but still full of surprises. You find yourself wandering through the dawn haze, drawn by the soft thump of pestles crushing millet in wooden mortars. The rhythm is almost musical. Someone hums a song you swear you haven't heard in decades, yet somehow you still know all the words. You drift toward the university, Sankor still standing, learning. The domes catch the morning light, and the call to prayer echoes gently off the ancient walls. The scholars move like shadows across the courtyard, books tucked under their arms, robes whispering with each step. Inside, the smell of parchment and oil lamps is as comforting as ever. You spot a young woman writing a treatise on astronomy and agriculture. You lean in to read over her shoulder. Her penmanship is impeccable. She looks up, amused. "You're blocking the light," she says, then grins. You're also welcome to help, old man. You do. And together you edit her opening paragraph. It now begins, in the time of Musa, even the stars paused to listen. She likes that. Historians still argue whether Musa truly expanded Sankor as grandly as the legends claim, or was it just a natural evolution of Timbuktu's thirst for knowledge? Some suggest he was more of a funder than a founder. But in these halls, the distinction seems petty. If his coins kept the candles lit, that's enough. You remember how excited he was by the idea of learning something useless, which to him meant beautiful. Once, he insisted you spend a week translating a love poem from a language he didn't speak. When you told him it made no political sense, he said, "Neither does rain, but we still need it." Later that afternoon, you visit the archives. A nervous custodian lets you into the oldest vault. Inside, the air is still, reverent. You pull a scroll with your handwriting on it. The ink has faded, but the words are there. A treaty, a poem, a recipe for honey-glazed flatbread. Musa insisted on refining for diplomatic purposes. And then, tucked behind the official documents, you find something you almost forgot. A note he left for you on your birthday, scrawled on camel hide. "Thank you for keeping track of my chaos. You deserve more naps than I do." He was wrong, of course. You never kept track of the chaos. You just recorded its heartbeat. In the streets, the people still walk the roads he paved, figuratively. However, a few sections of the ancient highway to Gao still bear his construction orders etched in stone, like faded whispers. Children play stickball in the dust, shouting things like, "I'm Mansa Musa," when they win, and "You're King Jellylegs," when they lose. The insults have evolved, but the spirit remains. You pass a merchant whose wares include tiny figurines carved from baobab wood. One is meant to be Musa, crown askew, scroll in hand, suspiciously muscular. The merchant winks. He's been hitting the gym in the afterlife. You laugh, then buy it. Back at the palace, now more of a museum, you sit in what used to be the Hall of Listening. It was where Musa hosted visiting poets, mystics, and merchants. He'd sit on the floor, shoes off, and listen. He once told you that a leader should spend twice as much time listening as talking and 4 times as much time reflecting as acting. He rarely followed his ratio, but when he did, magic happened. Someone has restored the room lovingly. The cushions have been replaced, the skylight cleaned, and the walls repainted in earth tones. But the layout remains. A low stool in the center, and beside it, the small clay jar you once knocked over during a particularly long philosophical debate. They kept it. You close your eyes there, letting the voices of the past murmur like a stream. You hear Musa laughing, debating, and declaring that dates dipped in yogurt were a miracle from heaven and goat. You hear your voice too, young, eager, occasionally muttering corrections under your breath. Then, footsteps. A young student enters, startled to see you. "Are you here for the story reading?" You open one eye. "Aren't I always?" She sets up a small scroll and begins to read. Her voice is clear and confident. The story is about a caravan, a sandstorm, and a misplaced crate of books. It sounds familiar. You realize it's yours, your writing preserved and retold. Honestly, she's made a few edits and improved it. You sit quietly, listening, as your words live again in someone else's voice. This, you think, is what Musa wanted all along. Not just memory, not just monuments, but stories that breathe, that shift, that return, that matter. The sun hangs low, smearing the sky in golds and dusky purples as you take one last slow walk through the city's edge, just past the outer wall where the baobab trees tilt like they've been whispering secrets for centuries. A boy herds goats past you, humming a song about a legendary king with a golden beard. Probably Musa again, though he never had a beard. Never mind. Legends rarely ask permission before embellishing themselves. You pass an old well that Musa insisted be lined with salt bricks to keep the water lucky. Scholars scoffed, but you remember how it became the cool spot where overheated workers dipped their hands and children tossed coins to wish for camels or courage. The well still stands, glinting in the fading light. Historians still debate whether Mansa Musa's wealth should be counted in coin or influence. Some say he destabilized economies by giving away too much gold. Others say he spread knowledge like fire, quiet, fast, and impossible to undo. Some focus on trade routes, others on Quranic verses he funded into poetry. But you, walking this familiar ground, think his richest currency was attention. He paid attention to people, to places, to the ideas that didn't seem to matter yet. You remember how he once halted an entire royal procession for an older woman crossing the street with a basket of figs. "Kingdom waits," he said, "but she shouldn't have to." That moment didn't make it into any official chronicle, but everyone remembers it here. They tell it like a riddle. The wind picks up as you near the river, the Niger wide and slow, pulsing with the same rhythm you've always known. You sit on the worn dock Musa had built, watching dusk settle over the water like velvet, the same creaking of boats and laughter echoing from unseen banks. A trader joins you, dropping a pouch of dried dates beside you. "From Gao," he says. "Some say Musa's spirit walks those dunes now." You smile. He probably tripped over his pride. The man snorts, or invented a new form of sand taxation. You both sit in easy silence, chewing dates, watching the stars nudge their way into view. Back at the palace-turned-library, a group of children gather for nightly storytelling. Tonight's tale is one you know by heart, Musa's crossing of the Sahara. They add dramatic pauses and wild hand gestures, and one child insists on portraying Musa as a wizard who can summon gold coins with a sneeze. You don't correct them, you never do. The truth lives alongside the myth, it always has, and somewhere between the exaggerated adventures and the historical footnotes lies the real gift Musa left behind. Not just what he did, but how he made people feel about what was possible. He showed them a world where a king could build libraries, travel for months to pray, or stop everything to marvel at an exceptionally symmetrical melon. He made curiosity look powerful. He made kindness look strategic. And when you close your eyes again, resting in the same city he once spun into legend, you feel the weight of it. Not heavy, but full like a blanket woven from stories and long walks and laughter shared in a foreign inn. This is legacy, not carved in stone but passed hand to hand. Now the voices fade. The fire in the lantern gutters is low, and the scent of warm earth and worn leather settles softly around you. The dust of the day drifts back to rest, and the heartbeat of the city slows with yours. You lie back, arms folded gently, listening to the rustle of wind through ancient trees, the same ones that watched Musa ride past with a camel train trailing behind him like a golden ribbon. You hear the low murmur of the river, patient and wide, carrying memories like pebbles downstream. Let the story settle around you now. Let the colors dim. The laughter echoes faintly like a dream you half remember. The facts and the fables can mingle freely here. No one needs to sort them out tonight. The journey has slowed. You've walked with kings, scribes, traders, poets. You've watched empires rise in the heat and stretch into the dusk. You've seen how even the grandest tales fold into whispers once the stars arrive. And now the sky deepens, the air stills. The world narrows into this soft moment, this resting place between history and sleep. There's no need to hold onto it all. Just the feeling, just the peace. Let your breath ease. Let your thoughts unravel gently like parchment in a breeze. And as the last candle flickers out, let the memory of gold-laced journeys and desert skies drift away, until it's just you, and silence, and sleep.